good morning. Thank you all for joining us for this introductory overview and presentation on training within industry, or TWI, and how it can help solve certain workforce challenges. Missouri Enterprise is the state's MEP center. We are dedicated to sustaining and supporting manufacturers in our state, no matter their needs. We will collectively continue to put our heads together on ways to help our manufacturing community overcome the current challenge that we are all facing together at this unprecedented time. As stated, one of those major challenges is, of course, workforce. And how do we pivot to meet the current demand, or perhaps lack thereof? We are joined by our TWI certified instructor, Laura Lee Rose, who has worked in manufacturing for nearly 30 years or more, depending on when we update her bio. She's seen by many Missouri manufacturers as an extension of their own team, working alongside them on workforce development initiatives or efforts on training. Before I kick this over to her, I have a brief PSA, and I just ask that you all stick around towards the end for our survey. We rely on this information to report to our federal partners, as well as to, of course, continue to improve and provide the services that we offer. So a big thank you in advance for that. And with that, Laura Lee, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'm very happy to be here. This is kind of new technology for me, so I'm grateful for Amy to be doing things in the background. I'm going to start sharing a few slides, and I just want to let you know, first of all, that this is just a very shallow dive into TWI, specifically the job instruction module. So I'm going to work on getting my screen shared here. And we're going to talk about why TWI is topical right now, because it really came about as a result of World War II. So if you guys are familiar with Rosie the Riveter, and I seem to have an issue now with being able to go to the next slide. Okay, let me try it again. Please bear with me as please stand by for technical difficulties. Let me try this again. And if you ever remember seeing Rosie the Riveter, she was the poster child for World War II manufacturing, specific to Boeing in 1940. And all the factories were flipping to war production, and they had a lot of people who'd never worked in manufacturing, a lot of housewives. And so the government, the military, the industry, and academia got together and started working on how do we train all these people very quickly. The slide, the purpose of it was to help them produce more materials than they ever thought possible, and to really accelerate that during the war. Now, if we're looking at today's environment, it's very similar, isn't it? We're not fighting a war necessarily, but we are fighting a war on COVID-19. So, and just because what we see is that many of the supervisors and trainers we have right now are sometimes our best operators, but that does not mean that they're always the best teachers, motivators, or people that know how to train. And so because of the tight job market we saw right before this COVID-19 pandemic hit, it was a very tight job market, and we had to promote from within. Baby boomers were retiring. We were losing a lot of the information that they were keeping in their heads. And so what happened is that as a result of TWI job instruction, they were actually able to do more than they ever thought possible. So they went from we can do it to we did it. And here are some of the results of the 600 factories that were actually using TWI services throughout the war. You can see they increased production. They actually reduced training time. They reduced labor hours and scrap and grievances. So what happened? What happened to it? Well, after the war, the men came back. They said, we don't need training. We know how to do these jobs. It was viewed as a war program. And it really provided attention to how people were treated. And that at that point in history, that made management a little uncomfortable. And there wasn't any infrastructure damage in the US, so we could quickly get back to mass producing consumer goods that were in high demand right after the war. So like many lean things that we learned during the war, TWI went to Japan and ultimately became part of the Toyota production system. It only came back to the United States about 20 years ago, a little less than 20 years ago. So why are we talking about something that came about during World War II now? Well, our president has actually kind of reinstated the Defense Production Act, and we see factories right now that are trying really, really hard to scale up manufacturing goods for healthcare workers, personal protective equipment, that kind of thing. We also know that this kind of training can really help in a strategic way because of the tight job market we've had. As those baby boomers are retiring, they're taking some information with them, that organizational knowledge, as ISO calls it. We need to make sure that we maintain quality when we have that attrition. And the most successful companies right now are those that are agile. They can flex the workforce to do some cross-training, and that's very important in order to decrease those lead times. And we always are going to need a proven method to transfer those skills very quickly. So what's the definition of job instruction? Job instruction is the way to get a person to quickly remember to do a job correctly, safely, and conscientiously. Now you'll notice that I put A in red and uppercase. And what that means is this is a one-on-one tool. And then there are 3 things underlined there that are really important to this method. So let's talk about them. Well, if we teach them to do a job correctly, that means we're going to have fewer defects, which results in less scrap and rework. If we teach them how to do it safely, it means fewer accidents and OSHA recordables. And if we teach them to do it conscientiously and they understand how they fit into the big picture and why it's important to do what they do, it will more than likely result in less tool and equipment damage. So those are the objectives of job instruction. And it's a very simple 4-step method, as are all the TWI modules. So here's the 4 steps. First of all, you have to prepare the worker to learn. You have to make sure, we'll be talking about each of these on the next slides. Then you have to present the operation. Repetition is a big part of this whole method. You let them try it out, and then there's a follow-up. So let's talk about the first one. The first one is preparing the worker, and this is really important. The first thing you have to do is put them at ease. So most of the time when people are learning something new, they're a little nervous. So you need to make sure that you put them at ease. You state what the job is. I am always surprised at how often when we are training someone, we don't tell them what we're training them for. So you say, this is what I'm training you for. You try to find out what they already know, and this is going to help them gain a little confidence. We use a knot tying example in class. And so one of the things I say is, were you ever a Boy Scout? Do you have a horse you have to tie up? Have you, do you tie your shoes? So that helps them gain a little more confidence as well. You get the person interested in learning the job. And that's really about asking them or showing them how this fits into the big picture. And that really helps that conscientiously piece. So I have, you say, okay, so this job is important. It's really important that you do it the right way because it's the why piece in there. And finally, you put them in the correct position. You got to make sure that when everybody knows when you're trying to teach a little kid how to tie their shoes, it's really hard for you to stand in front of them because they're seeing it backwards. So you got to make sure if you're teaching them something that has to do with right and left, that they're looking over we always like to say, looking over your left shoulder. So those are some of the things in prepare the worker. The next piece, the next step in this process is to present the operation. And I said that earlier that repetition is important. The only way we learn a new skill is through practice, and practice means repetition. So the first thing you do, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but you tell them, you show them, and you illustrate one important step at a time. One of the big reasons that we do this is that so often when we're trying to train people, we try to tell them everything we know about the job all at once. I always say it's like taking a person and putting a big birthday cake in front of them, and instead of giving them a piece and a fork to eat it with, a piece at a time, we just smash their head in the cake and then maybe just you know, roll their head around in it for a while. So we tell them and illustrate one important step, and we'll get into the whole important step. Then we tell and show, illustrate again, and we add key points. Once again, I'll tell you what those are in a minute. And then we do it all again, and we state the reason why. And I think this is the most important part, because I'll do anything if you tell me why I have to do it. Finally, you have to make sure you instruct clearly, completely, and patiently. And here's the kicker. You can't give them more information than they can master at one time. We have to give the human brain can only recognize and remember short bursts of information. The third step is to try out performance. This is when we let them try it. So we have them do the job. We say, okay, let's see if you can at least copy my movements. And the other thing you got to remember is as soon as they make a mistake, you correct it right then. You can't let that error get in part of their muscle memory. You have to then you say, okay, now I want you to do it again. You show me you know the motions, but I just want you to state the important steps. We've gone over what the important steps are. You ask them to do it a third time and say, okay, let's add in those key points. And finally, I want you to do it a fourth time, and I want you to add the reasons. Now, many times when the first time they do it, they'll tell you everything they know. But this is the repetition that you have to have. And when we're in the class, people say, oh, why do I have to do it so many times? And I say, because repetition is how we learn. You have to continue until you make sure that the person understands, and you continue until you as the trainer know that they as the learner know. Finally, you can't just then walk away. There has to be some follow-up. And the follow-up here is you put them on their own. You tell them what the expectation is. You tell them who to go to for help. You designate someone. Usually it's the trainer, but you say, if I'm not here, you can talk to Bob or Joe. They know how to do this job and they know how to train. You check frequently. You say, I'll be back in 5 to 10 minutes or whatever it is. And usually if they're going to make a mistake, they're going to make it in the first few minutes. You encourage questions. You don't just say, do you have any questions? Because that's a yes or no answer. You ask it like, you say, what questions do you have? And you say things like, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. And finally, you taper off coaching and the follow-up. And that's the 4-step method to job instruction. There's no rocket science here. It's very simple, it's repetitive, and it works. As I said before, as I showed you how well it worked during World War II. So the heart of the method is something we call Jibs, or job instruction breakdown sheets. Now these are not work instructions. These are not SOPs. They are perhaps built from more formal work instructions. What this is a cheat sheet or a script for the trainer. It's only for the trainer. It's not given to the worker. It's so that the instructor can remember all the important steps. Now I want to point out 3 things on this slide. First of all, the important steps. It says right under there on the left-hand side, it's a segment of the operation that something happens to advance the work. Under key points, remember we have to go through and just do the important steps, and then we add the key points. The key points, there's 3 things there. It's something that makes or breaks the job. It's a safety concern that might injure the worker. And the third thing is this piece that I hardly ever find in work instructions. It makes the work easier to do. It's a knack or a trick or some kind of special information. And finally, the last column on the right is the reasons for each key point. We're going to be covering this more in a future webinar and how to do a job breakdown. And these are really, really important, and they're kind of the heart of the whole job instruction piece. So the question always comes up, who should I get to do, how do I make a job breakdown? Well, first you have to find the person who's doing the job. The person who knows how to do the job the best is the person who's doing it right now. You ask them to perform the job, you watch them, you ask them to tell you what they're doing, you create that breakdown that I just showed you on that sheet, and finally, you train the employee. Then you try it out. You try it out on somebody who doesn't know the job at all, make sure you've got it right. This is not something that you're going to chisel in stone and never, ever, ever change. But this is how you find out, or how you train someone very quickly. So what are the results? The results are, you get ready to instruct. This is the other side of the only thing that people take away from this training is a little blue laminated card. That card has everything you need to know to help you remember how to do this. And the back side of the card is the get ready to instruct side. It includes these 4 steps. You have to make a timetable for training, which we're going to see on the next slide. Number 2 is to break down the job like we just discussed, doing job breakdown, and that's the key important steps, key points and reasons. And then number 3 is get everything ready, which means you have everything that you need to train that person right there. The equipment, the tools, the materials, and the supplies. You'll notice at the top of the job instruction breakdown that all that stuff is listed so you don't forget it. And finally, arrange the work site like it will be in real working conditions, whether it's actually on the job or in some kind of simulated area. So let's talk about that timetable. A lot of you, this is going to look familiar. It's lists who we're going to train for what jobs by when. If you have a training matrix for maybe ISO purposes, you'll notice that the names of the employees are listed across the top and each of the tasks to be taught. Usually there's a breakdown for each of those is listed down the left-hand side. One of the ways it's different is that it captures on the right side changes in production. You see that? It helps you realize or think about, is production going to go up or down? And at the bottom, you're going to list any turnover that you know is on the horizon, maybe due to a promotion or turnover or retirements. And the last thing you need to consider is there anybody who needs additional training because maybe their work is not up to par in any of the jobs? You'll notice the legend across the top of this piece that explains the filled in circles so that you can tell at a glance who needs training or who is able to do the training. Here they have not trained all the way up to a mentor, which is somebody that I say could probably do the training. So we talked about some of the results of JI training that came about as a result of World War II, but I want to just kind of touch on that, circle around to that again. When you do this, you can actually reduce your training time. Now, people say, I have to do it 3 times and I have to watch them do it 4 times for every single task or activity there is. That takes a lot of time. And I say you are putting that time in up front so you don't have to do it at the end. You can increase production because you do reduce that training time and because you have a quality product, fewer accidents, because part of the key points in every situation is fewer accidents. I mean, is a safety thing. Because they understand why they're doing things, it does increase job satisfaction and morale. We have less scrap and rework because those defects go down because they're properly trained, which also leads to increased profit. You have less equipment and tool damage. You have a consistency. One of the things that we see everywhere we go is if you have more than one shift and people move from shift to shift, if I'm on second and I move to first shift and I'm doing a job, I will invariably hear, I don't know who trained you, but that's not how we do things on first shift. This is the kind of thing that helps us get that standardized work so it doesn't matter what shift we're on, we're doing things the same way. And this is the TWI Mantra. If the worker hasn't learned, the instructor hasn't taught. I'm sure that there are those of you out there who have done corrective actions, who have an ISO system. As an ISO auditor myself, if I see a corrective action that says worker training, I go ballistic because of what this slide says. If the worker hasn't learned, it's nobody's fault but the instructor. And it means that the instructor wasn't effective. So I have given you the Reader's Digest condensed version of TWI job instruction in a very short period of time. And I know I talk fast. This is a very weird technology for me because I'm used to seeing people and seeing how they're responding. They're nodding off. I get a little louder. Here are the TWI instructors at Missouri Enterprise. You'll see me and my contact information on the left. April Schmidt is in the middle, and Mr. Dave Goebel is there on the right. These are 3 people on our staff who are certified. It's a 40-hour certification that we have to do through the TWI Institute. And I think I'm going to kick it back to Amy. Are we taking questions, Amy?
We certainly are. So we encourage you all, if you have any questions, just click on that chat button below. Looks like a little bubble for those of you who have not used Zoom, and just type your questions and we can all see those, and give you a couple minutes to do that if you do have any questions. And as you're thinking about those, we also want to make sure, again, that you stick around just for a few minutes just to answer these quick polling questions. I'll go ahead and get that started now as you're thinking about, oh, thank you, Rachel Hankerson. I just want to let you know you are an absolute rock star. I really appreciate just how engaged Rachel has been with following up and working hard to help our state and our country answer the PPE supply chain demand. So yes, you deserve that. I'm giving you a virtual round of applause. And thank you to all of the other manufacturers that are on the line, working hard day in and day out to support your employees, their families, our community, and our economy. So really appreciate that. Yes, the slides will be available after this session. And I was going to cover that, but you beat me to it. We're going to send a recording of this so you can watch us over and over again if you'd like. In addition to that, though, I do want to let you know we're going to have a follow-up next Wednesday, the 22nd, where Laura Lee will provide some examples, some real-life case studies and how this works. In addition to that, offer some one-on-one free sessions for you and your company. So you get to welcome her, whether you're working from home like some of us, or in the office. She's going to come to you and she can discuss how TWI can really work for your manufacturing company or business. And then followed by that, we're going to have a little panel discussion. We'll see how this works. We're going to invite some of our other manufacturers who have utilized TWI to improve their workforce initiatives. And we really hope they're going to share some best practices as well as maybe some failures of where things didn't go the way they planned. Because I think that's how we all learn, right? Is by failing and figuring out what to do and what to do better. So just, yes, to answer your question, Steve, we will be sharing all this information as well as invitations to those events. Thank you for all of you for sticking around. I really appreciate it. I have everyone that was here at the beginning is still here, and I just launched that session. Poll. There's just 4 quick questions. Was this helpful? Have you heard of TWI before? We sent this email to you about TWI. Would you ever consider using it as a workforce solution? And if so, when would you be thinking about using TWI? As Laura Lee indicated, we do have several experts here that can help you with those programs, but it's always good for us to kind of understand the demand out there so we can plan accordingly. So we really appreciate you answering that question. And those answers are coming right in. I feel like I'm a talk show host. Look at that, 64% coming in, 86%. It's all great. So thank you. This is great. Oh, hey, Mark from Seeds of Happiness. And say hello and to be distracting to Dave and Ned. I will, absolutely. That is my goal in life, is to continue to just, poke them every once in a while. So yes, Mark, I'm on that. And again, shout out to Seeds of Happiness. Thank you for everything you do to make the world a better place. So if you're on the phone still and you haven't heard of Seeds of Happiness, they are based, of course, here in the Show Me State. Look them up. It's a fabulous story there. So thank you for everything you're doing. I imagine you all have some kind of COVID-19 seed of happiness that perhaps you can show us or send our way. So tweet that at us, and we'd love to share that with our community. Also, you guys see our social media accounts to my right. We'd love for you to follow us, and we'll be sure to continue to keep you updated on all things COVID-19 as it relates specifically to manufacturers. So that's one thing that we're doing differently here, is just information geared towards you. Okay.
Hey, Amy, there's one more. There's a really good question from my friend Matt Holtman. Hi, Matt.
Great. Hey, Matt.
How do you create a job breakdown if you have multiple experts with different ways of doing a job? That is an issue, and that is something that Anybody that's doing lean knows that in order to have standard work, you have to have the one best way to do it. So you have to get those people together. And what we say is that you need somebody from first shift and second shift if you have different shifts. If you have those experts, you watch them all do it. And what will happen is that you will get an amalgamation of the one best way, because the person will say, oh, I didn't know. That's a really good idea, or that's not how I do it. Let me show you how I do it. And they have to come up with an agreement on what the one best way is. So that's a great question. Thank you, Matt.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Did you see one from Susan Whitehead?
I did.
Okay.
We are actually working on that. April Schmidt, who is one of our instructors, and I are working with the TWI Institute on best practice in a way that we can actually do the training remotely. I have tried it a couple of times, and I think that it's important that we try to work on that. We teach some other courses, are starting to offer them virtually. So stay tuned for that too, Susan. Thank you. That's a great question. And that's something we probably should have added to the poll, because this is a really important thing that's very topical right now and very important right now. So we can figure out a way to do that. And hopefully very quickly. April and I are working on it.
Yes. And we really hope that that one-on-one session that you'll be offering next week, Laura Lee, will continue to help us perfect this process. Because again, we are all in this together. As Rosie the Riveter was so famously depicted as stating, we can do it. You can do it. We can do it. We just have to sometimes quiet our critters and kids in the background, which you missed that earlier. It's only temporary, guys. So just know that Missouri Enterprise is here for you. So thank you. With that, next time and date of next Wednesday. Great question. April 22nd at 10 a.m. But again, if you don't jot that down, it's okay, because I'm going to follow up with all that information. So just check your emails and you'll see that. Okay. I think that's it. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you for completing our survey. Really, really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. Thank you.